pirate's life is a wonderful life, a roving over the sea. Give me a career as a buccaneer, it's the life of a pirate for me. Oh, the life of a pirate for me.
Character and franchise redesigns or reboots are often very common no matter what medium you're in. Sometimes they can be pretty interesting, such as Batman's many redesigns, and sometimes they can be incredibly stupid, such as the jump from cartoon to real life that Garfield has gotten. The main idea behind a franchise redesign or reboot is basically to appeal to a wider audience, draw newcomers in, while still holding that nostalgia factor that made it so wonderful in the first place, or to just capture an entirely new demographic. However, the one that left most people scratching their heads was Zelda's redesign. Released in North America in 2003, the first GameCube Zelda game left a lot of people scratching their heads since it was given a very cartoonish and light-hearted look, which really clashed if you were just getting done playing Majora's Mask and went straight to this game. Initial backlash was pretty heavy and most people did not really care for the look, especially the hardcore Zelda fans who had been into it from the beginning. I will admit that originally I did not have a very fond outlook on the game, but after sitting down and actually playing through it, I am happy to report that it is all Zelda. The story this time is much more indicative of what Zelda fans have expected a story in a Zelda game to be, but it does take a rather unique twist on it. The game takes place close to the end of the Zelda timeline, with Hyrule being submerged underwater. The reason for this is, after the events of Ocarina of Time, Link was returned to his childhood, but then Ganon came back. And since there was no Link in that time to stop him, Ganon basically took over the entire world. With no other way to stop him, the people began to pray to the goddesses, who did the most responsible thing they could think of and flooded the entire world of Hyrule, leaving the entire world nothing but a giant ocean with a few small islands cropping out here and there. However, the legend of Link in the Ocarina of Time has become a legend among the islands, and every time a young boy turns 12 here, he is dressed in green as a symbol that he is at the same age as the hero of time. And it just so happens that on one particular island, this game's Link is turning that age now, and his grandmother gives him the ceremonial green robes that were believed to have been worn by the great hero, and it is on this day, his birthday no less, that his adventure begins. After rescuing a pirate girl named Tetra from a bunch of moblins inside a forest, Link's sister is accidentally kidnapped by the Helmarock King, a giant bird that mistakes her for Tetra because of her pointed ears. Guilted into helping Link get his sister back, Tetra and the pirates take him to the Fortress of Darkness, which just happens to be where not only the Helmarock King resides, but also Ganondorf. After a botched rescue attempt by Link, he is unfortunately tossed out into the sea by the Helmarock King, and is saved by the King of Red Lions, a talking boat. What? You don't think that's possible? Now, what I enjoy about this setup is the fact that Link is not painted to be a legendary hero right from the start. His goals are much, much simpler. He just wants to rescue his sister. However, as time goes on, he does realize that he has a much bigger role to play, but his sister still takes precedent, unlike the earlier games where he was told almost from the beginning of the game that he did in fact have a very large role to play in saving the world. In fact, in the two original games, we were informed in the instruction manual about his destiny, and he seemed to know it right from the start because it was never really mentioned again in the entire game. In terms of core gameplay, not a whole lot has changed, and I know I've been saying that for the past few reviews, but it's true. When they made the leap from 2D to 3D, they kept quite a few of the elements from game to game because they work so well. There are a few minor additions, but we'll get to them as we go. But for right now, all you really need to know is Link can still equip 3 different weapons, and he still has the same sword-slashing abilities. And combat is basically the same as it was in the last 2 games, what with the L target, no longer the Z target because the Z button is now for equipping items in this game. There was one really neat innovation made to the combat, and that's the ability to counterattack. If you time it right, when a Spidey Sense thing comes up on screen, you'll be able to actually flip behind your opponent and attack them in the back. This was a pretty neat innovation and came in real handy against later enemies. Link does get some nifty new toys in this game, such as the grappling hook, which acts as a low-grade version of the hookshot, and the Deku Leaf, which allows him to blow gusts of wind at enemies and objects, and also to float for a limited amount of time. And then of course there's the obligatory magical musical instrument that seems to be a recurring theme in almost every Zelda game. In this case, however, it's not really an instrument, but instead a conductor's baton, the Wind Waker. Boom! Title drop! However, unlike other instruments in the Zelda game where you simply tap out a certain sequence of notes, instead you're waving the baton in a certain direction and you have to choose what kind of rhythm you want, such as 3-4, 4-4, or 6-4 time. This adds a bit more complication later on when you start getting more complicated tunes, but the main reason that you have this instrument is to control the winds, and that is for... well, I'll get into that in just a second. Now, up until this point, I haven't really picked on the Zelda series that much. I've pointed out a few things that have annoyed me in past games, but for the most part they have been very small nitpicks, and aren't really game breakers. However, Wind Waker has one of the biggest flaws to its gameplay of any Zelda title anywhere, and that is the mode of transportation. Sailing. Sailing in this game is so unabashedly boring and pointless that it actually made me stop playing the game for a while after I first started it. And believe me, you will be doing so much sailing in this game that I think you spend more time on this boat than you actually do inside the dungeons or on the islands that you're looking for.